Welcome back to the fog, my friends. Come, stay a while and listen. I'm Taylor, your casual crypt keeper, and I've got something for you. Despite a horrific nuclear meltdown and one of the worst nuclear incidents in history, the creatures of Chernobyl persisted onwards. Double check that Geiger counter, stalkers, because today we are headed deep into the zone to discover what sort of strange things exist beyond the exclusion zone. This is the top 5 scary creatures found inside Chernobyl, such as life in the zone. Chernobyl, is it a must-see tourist destination for you? Or are you waiting a few hundred years for the glow to settle down a little bit? Let me know down below in the comments. Number 5. Pigs and boars. This infamous piglet you're seeing right now is one of the most extreme examples of radiation mutations found inside Chernobyl. It's the corpse of a stillborn piglet that was born on a nearby farm to the zone shortly after the blast. Its body was preserved and resides in the Kiev Chernobyl Museum, serving as a grim reminder of the horrifying effects like this on the local population. It's far from just the farm pigs that were affected by the blast, however. To this day, the boars surrounding Chernobyl are still irradiated. Now, an irradiated boar on paper might sound exciting, maybe to you, maybe to me. Maybe it sounds like the kind of thing you'd clear out of a super duper mart in Fallout 4, but in practice, it's a dangerous nuisance to locals in surrounding regions, where wild boar meat is popular in stews and other cooking. Unfortunately, you can't really tell just by, eyeballing a boar whether or not it's irradiated or not. They don't glow green or anything helpful, although that would be great. You wouldn't even need to have streetlights if they did that. You just let all the irradiated boars fill up the night. The unfortunate thing is that the boars are irradiating themselves on their own food source. They're eating from wild mushrooms and the soil has been so infested. This is where things get terrifying, to really hammer home how dangerous a radiation spill is. The radiation from Chernobyl passed through the air, where it's rooted into the soil in the Czech Republic, where it steeps into the agriculture. A terrifying statistic from 2017 states that 1 in every 3 boars bagged by hunters was radioactive. Now, if you're a Czech viewer and you're getting a little bit panicked, it should be mentioned, first of all, radiated boar meat, it's one of those things where like a little bit as a treat is fine. Don't have a radiated boar meat every single day of your life, but hey, a little bit's not so bad for you. It's like sugar. The Czech government inspected 614 pigs processed into meat between 2014 and 2016 and discovered that over 300 of them were too radioactive to eat. So, this hazardous meat had been banned from use altogether. So unless you're specifically going out looking for it, you should be safe to try the goulash the next time you're wandering up the Czech Republic. Now, a little question I have. 300 of those were considered too radioactive. What is the acceptable level of radiation in your meat? How irradiated is something allowed to be before they put a sticker on it? Do you think it's one of those things where if it's just too irradiated, they mark it down for 50% off at the grocery store like expired sushi? Just a little something to think about for you at home. And if you're looking for more creepy content, stories from Chernobyl, natural disasters, ghosts, goblins, aliens, cryptids, and just about everything spooky under the sun and above it, Top 5 Scary is the place to be, baby. Drop a subscribe or a like and stay scared all night long. Let's keep moving. Number 4. Mutant calves. Surrounding the areas of Chernobyl was a lot of rich, tillable soil, bountiful and just asking to be plowed. This meant one of the more common trades around the zone was farming, and meant there was a significant amount of livestock populating Chernobyl. When the radiation first burst, many people evacuating from the zone saw their livelihoods being taken from them and decided to take their cows with them as they left. That's fair, I wouldn't leave the cows behind either, you don't want them turning into Brahmin. While this generation of refugee cows seemed okay, it was when the next generation of baby cows were born that dark problems began to arise. Farmers were noticing that they had an absurdly high rate of defected, malformed, and mutated baby calves being born. Now, sometimes the mutations would be fairly simple defects like a missing eye, or sometimes they'd be extreme, like the internal organs being all messed up, all the way to outwardly horrifying, looking like something out of a David Cronenberg flick, with cows being born with their spines twisted around, their heads contorted, or born with extra limbs or not the right amount of limbs. Basically, no good answer. Luckily, or tragically, depending on your view of things, very few of these mutant calves ever lived for more than a few hours. Basically just enough time to get into the world, see the horrors that they were brought into, and check out. Nature is very impressive, but if you get born with all of your organs on the outside, you don't have a fair shot at things. Future generations of calves would straighten out, but that doesn't mean things were all clear just yet. It just meant that the contamination was getting more internal. Future generations of calves were starting to produce milk that was laced with radiation, which probably gave it a bit of a zesty flavor, and I'm sure gives you some latent superpower. You could be the amazing cowman, capable of producing And you know what? Actually, I'm not gonna finish that thought. We're gonna take that one back to the drawing board before I pitch that to Marvel. Besides, I think cowman might be a bit of an oxymoron. Number 3, birds. Many creatures have not fared well adapting to the horrors of the exclusion zone. Creatures like bees, butterflies, grasshoppers, and dragonflies all died off in record numbers. Most likely because animals like these all lay their eggs in soil, which has unfortunately been completely poisoned by radioactivity. Now, among the many creatures affected by the blast, but still living in the zone, are some small species of birds that soar the skies around Pripyat, able to lay their eggs away from the toxicity of the ground. Now, although most species of birds have either died off or fled the area, there are some that still inhabit the areas around the exclusion zone. One of the most common birds affected by the radiation is the barn swallow. It's a beautiful little bird, but it's been changed a lot. It's unknown if these birds have been mutated by radiation or if they're naturally trying to adapt and evolving in a way that doesn't quite make sense. Scientists and researchers don't know too if they're ever going to see this specific control group of birds reverting back to the way they'd been before. A study of barn swallows ranging all the way from 1991 to 2006, so that is a lot of barn swallows, have shown that birds living in the zone are significantly more abnormal than birds outside of it. They range from aesthetic differences, like, an albino barn swallow, or they've got the wrong color feather here and there and it just makes them seem a little bit more unique. And then there's some of the more gross disfigurations and deformations like a twisted beak or a bent tail feather, maybe an eye that doesn't open up, and then there's the horrifying ones like air sacs being deformed and birdie organs being in the wrong places or large tumors all over the bird's body. What's really interesting though, maybe this is the wrong use of the word interesting to me, a guy who only looks at, pictures of mutated animals and horrible things, none of the birds studied appeared to display more than one abnormality at a time, like they didn't have room in their little birdie bodies. The Chernobyl specimens also frequently had cataracts and were flying literally blind, and were shown on average to have much smaller brains. Talk about a real bird brain. A real irradiated, blind, tumorous bird brain. Number 2, spiders. Hey, let's not kid ourselves here. If there was one creature on the planet, one creature that we would most want to be radioactive, it has to be a spider, right? I know some of you at home might not like spiders. I'm personally kind of ambivalent towards them, but a radioactive spider, that carries the extremely high possibility of being able to turn a young boy into a noble Spider-Man and allow him to spin a web any size and catch crooks just like flies, which has always been one of my biggest career plans. Well, the spiders that inhabit Chernobyl in the exclusion zone definitely are radioactive. That much is true. But a bite from one of them won't have you swinging in between skyscrapers in Queens, dodging the Green Goblin's pumpkins anytime soon. It'll probably just make you horrifyingly sick. Radioactive spiders is literally comic book stuff, and yet populating Chernobyl, they are all just hanging in there. They're not nearly as abundant as they were prior to the blast, living in significantly reduced numbers, which is probably a positive to some people, but they still pose a very dangerous threat for wildlife and visitors regardless. What makes them truly scary is it isn't just the spiders that are irradiated that you need to watch out for, but the webs they produce now are infected with radioactivity. Now, it's not all scary, because personally I find this next part absolutely fascinating. The irradiated spiders are spinning webs that are different patterns than a normal spider would. That's like so cool. They don't spin in traditional hexagonal webs, but rather these like sweet psychedelic patterns that would look absolutely perfect on one of those posters to shine a black light on. You know the ones I mean. Curiously, scientists aren't 100% sure why the irradiated spider webs are coming out looking like this. But look, do not touch them, as walking through these webs have proven to be pretty hazardous. Having to avoid radioactive webs in the wilderness of an abandoned nuclear city sounds like it'd be like really cool if I was playing Stalker or something, but I think I am good where I am, where there might be spiders and they might be kind of gross, but they're not particularly irradiated whatsoever. Number 1, dogs. One of the more common creatures out in the zone is a humble puppy. The dogs of Chernobyl have a rich culture and are an interesting biological study. They're born from a tragic history, as the dogs that populate the zone are the descendants of abandoned dogs when the evacuation order was first placed. They're like a little gang of renegade dogs. Renegade wasteland survivor dogs. Like, they're all dog meat. That's so cool. Pripyat and the surrounding villages were abandoned almost overnight, and residents weren't allowed to take their pets with them. Stories tell of dogs howling, clawing, trying to get onto the buses with their owners. Oh, I'm actually gonna start crying in the video. Soldiers pulled them off the buses. Squads went in and hunted down the dogs of the zone in an effort to clear any active contaminants. Those that managed to survive would carry the lineage to the next generation. And quick aside, aside here, but would that not make an amazing movie following the story of these wasteland survivor dogs who had to escape getting hunted by soldiers? Anyway, it's their descendants that now populate the outskirts of the zone. The wild pups of Chernobyl look identical to a dog you'd find anywhere else in the world, no extra fangs or glowing eyes or anything, but there is concern that there are trace amounts of radiation in their fur. You get a little bit of a zap when you're petting them. Unfortunately, these dogs don't live very long. The higher ages tend to be around 5 to 6, but they are beloved by visitors of Chernobyl. They've become sort of the unofficial mascot of the place. A volunteer group called the Dogs of Chernobyl capture them, they vaccinate the dogs, and ID tag them. Some of the doggies too are fitted with Geiger counter collars, that's so cute, allowing researchers to get eyes and paws on the ground in places they wouldn't normally be able to as they track them as they hop, skip, and jump around the wild of the exclusion zone. Now, there's no rules enforced about the dogs, obviously, because there's not a whole lot of law going on in Chernobyl, but guides who do visits to Chernobyl ask people to please exercise caution as they could genuinely be irradiated. But at the core, despite the hardships of their environment, the hellish conditions they had to grow in, the puppies of Chernobyl they're still just puppies. They're playful, adorable, loving, loyal creatures who just have a little bit too much radiation for me to snuggle them. Well, that's all she wrote, my stalkers. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you had a good time with the video. Keep on creeping on, stay cheeky breeky, and I'll see you in the next one.